"Daddy, my tummy hurts." Helena's voice echoed over the phone line like a muffled cry. But David was in the middle of a meeting too important to be interrupted. He glanced at the cell phone vibrating on the mahogany table and saw his daughter's name flashing on the screen. 5 years old, and she already knew how to dial his number by heart. That should have meant something. Should have been a warning sign, but David just pressed the red button and ended the call. The investors sitting around the table didn't even notice the interruption. They were all focused on the presentation he had prepared for weeks, the one that would secure $80 million in funding for the company's expansion. $80 million that would put his name among the most successful entrepreneurs in Chicago, among the men who made a difference in the American tech market. Hello, listener. If you enjoy emotional stories, please subscribe to our channel and comment on where you're watching from. This greatly helps our work. The meeting room was on the 23rd floor of a commercial building on Wacker Drive, overlooking the entire city that never slept. Down below, millions of people rushed from one place to another, each chasing their own dreams, their own goals. David had always felt part of that frenetic energy, that relentless pursuit of more. More money, more power, more recognition. He had built his company from scratch, starting in a rented apartment in Wicker Park, working 18 hours a day, sacrificing weekends and holidays. Now, 12 years later, he had 150 employees and annual revenue that exceeded $50 million. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. The phone vibrated again. Helena again. David felt a pang of irritation, mixed with something he didn't want to name. Guilt, maybe, or fear. He swiped his finger across the screen and declined the call once more, putting the device on silent mode. The investors were impressed with the numbers he presented. A growth rate of 40% a year, profit margins above the industry average, a client portfolio that included some of the largest companies in the country. Everything perfect on paper, everything running like a well-oiled machine. 20 minutes later, when the meeting finally ended and handshakes were exchanged and promises were made, David picked up his cell phone and saw 14 missed calls, all from Helena. His stomach churned. 14 calls in 20 minutes. A 5-year-old child desperately calling her father, who was too busy to answer. He dialed back with trembling hands, but no one picked up. He tried again. Nothing. He called Jessica, the nanny who looked after Helena every afternoon. The call went straight to voicemail. David left the meeting room almost at a run, leaving behind the investors who still wanted to talk about contract details. He got into the elevator and pressed the ground floor button so hard his finger hurt. The numbers on the panel descended too slowly. 23, 22, 21. Each floor was an eternity. He tried calling home again. Nothing. Tried Jessica one more time. Voicemail. When he finally reached the parking garage, David ran to his car, a black BMW he had bought the previous year as a reward for closing a particularly lucrative contract. Now that car felt like a prison. He got in, started the engine and sped off, ignoring the speed limit, ignoring the yellow lights, ignoring everything except getting home as fast as possible. The traffic on the drive was hellish as always. Cars stopped in endless lines, horns honking non-stop, motorcycles squeezing between vehicles. David cursed out loud, slammed his hand on the steering wheel, felt the sweat dripping down his forehead, even with the air conditioning on full blast. He lived in Lincoln Park, in a gated community with 24-hour security, a pool, a tennis court, a playground, a 3,200 square foot house that had cost $2.5 million. 3 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, an open-plan kitchen, living room, dining room, office. All decorated by a famous designer who charged a fortune to choose every piece of furniture, every painting, every cushion. Laura, his ex-wife, had loved the house when they moved in. She said it was the kind of place she had always dreamed of living. But that was before the divorce, before she met a mining executive who had even more money than David, before she decided she preferred to live in Denver with the new man than stay in Chicago with the husband who worked too much and was always too tired, always too stressed, always with his head somewhere else. Helena had stayed with David. Laura didn't even fight for custody. She said she didn't have the emotional structure to raise a child alone, that she needed time to find herself, to discover who she really was. In truth, her new boyfriend had made it clear he didn't want kids around. David accepted custody of Helena without hesitation, not out of deep paternal love, but because it seemed like the right thing to do. Because it was what was expected of him. Because he didn't want people to say he had abandoned his own daughter. But the truth he never admitted even to himself, was that Helena had become just another item on his list of responsibilities. One more thing to manage, one more thing to delegate. He hired Jessica, a 28-year-old woman with great references, who came every day from 2 in the afternoon until 6 in the evening. He also hired a housekeeper who cleaned the house 3 times a week, a meal prep service that prepared meals and left everything ready in the fridge, a driver who took Helena to the very expensive private school she attended. Everything outsourced, everything organized, everything working perfectly on paper. The problem was that paper didn't realize that a 5-year-old girl needed more than well-paid employees. She needed a present father, a father who ate dinner with her, who put her to bed, who listened to the silly stories she made up, who dried her tears when she fell and scraped her knee. But David was always working, always in a meeting, always with an unmissable commitment, always choosing money over his daughter. He finally arrived at the community, passed through the gate that opened automatically recognizing his license plate, and drove up the tree-lined street to his house. His heart was beating so hard he could hear the pulse pounding in his ears. He parked crookedly in the garage, didn't even bother to turn off the engine properly, and ran to the front door. The key trembled in the lock. He opened the door with such force that it slammed against the wall. "Helena," he shouted, entering the living room. The silence that answered was deafening. No sound of television, no noise of playing, nothing. David ran down the hallway, looked in the living room, empty. Looked in his daughter's room, empty. He went to the kitchen, and that's where he found her. Helena was sitting on the floor, leaning against the cabinet under the sink, clutching her favorite doll to her chest. Her little face was red and swollen from crying so much. Her blue eyes, identical to her mother's, were full of tears that were still streaming. The floor around her was a mess. Fruit scattered everywhere. Oranges, apples, bananas thrown, as if someone had knocked over the entire fruit bowl. An overturned glass near the sink. Water still running over the white marble countertop. The chair pushed far away from the table. And Helena there in the middle of it all, tiny, scared, alone. "Daddy," she whispered when she saw him, and her voice came out so weak that David almost didn't hear it. "My tummy hurts so much. I called you so many times. You didn't come." David felt as if someone had stuck a knife in his chest and twisted it. He took 2 steps toward his daughter, knelt down and picked her up as carefully as if she were made of glass. Her little body was too hot, a fever. She had a fever and was here alone, suffering, while he was closing deals, while he was chasing millions that suddenly meant absolutely nothing. "Where's Jessica?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm even as panic took over everything. "Where's the nanny, my love?" "She left," Helena said between sobs. "She said she had an emergency. She said I should be quiet until you got here. But you took too long, Daddy. You took so long. And I got scared. And it hurt so much." David pressed his daughter against his chest, feeling his own throat tighten. Jessica had left and left a 5-year-old child alone. Had left Helena alone in a huge house, in pain, scared, desperately calling a father who didn't answer because he was too busy being successful. He stood up with Helena in his arms and went to the living room, sitting on the sofa with her on his lap. He stroked her blonde hair, the little curls that Laura always made sure to arrange before she went to school. "We're going to the hospital," he said. "We're going now. Daddy will take care of you." Helena just nodded, too weak to speak, too tired from crying. David held her tight and went to the car, settling her in the back seat with the seatbelt. He got in the car and sped off again, now heading toward Northwestern Memorial Hospital, the best in the region, where he had a top-tier health insurance plan that covered everything. At least he hadn't skimped on that. At least he had done the right thing there, even if for the wrong reasons. During the drive, he looked in the rearview mirror every 2 seconds, checking if Helena was okay, if she was still awake, if she was still breathing. The fear was a living thing inside him now, growing, spreading, taking over every thought. And along with the fear came the guilt. The terrible guilt of knowing that this was his fault, that if anything happened to Helena, it would be because he wasn't there, because he chose a meeting over his own daughter. The traffic seemed to conspire against him. Every red light was torture. Every slow car in front was an unbearable obstacle. David honked, overtook, sped, did everything he could to get there faster. And the whole time, Helena's weak little voice echoed in his head. "Daddy, my tummy hurts. I called you so many times." "You didn't come." The hospital was crowded, as always, but David didn't care about the line. He entered the emergency room carrying Helena, who now seemed to be asleep or passed out, he wasn't sure. The receptionist looked at him and the girl and immediately called a nurse. Everything happened quickly after that. Helena was put on a gurney, taken to an exam room, connected to monitors that beeped and showed numbers David didn't understand. He stayed by her side the whole time, holding her small hand. Feeling how hot and sweaty it was, a doctor appeared, a man in his 40s with graying hair and a serious expression that did nothing to calm David's panic. He examined Helena, pressed her belly in several places, asked questions about when the pain had started, what she had eaten, if she had a fever before. David tried to answer, but realized with horror that he didn't know. He didn't know what his daughter had eaten for breakfast. He didn't know if she had complained about anything before. He didn't know anything because he wasn't present, because he entrusted everything to Jessica and didn't even bother to ask how the day had been. "You're her father?" the doctor asked, and there was something in his tone that made David feel even worse. Something that sounded like judgment, as if the doctor could see right through him and see the negligent father he had become. "Yes, I'm her father," David replied, and his voice came out rougher than usual. "My ex-wife lives in Denver, so it's just me and Helena." The doctor nodded and continued examining. He ordered blood tests and ultrasound, urine tests. The nurse came and put a needle in Helena's little arm to draw blood. The girl woke up with the pain and started crying again, calling for her daddy, clinging to him. David held her tight, whispering that it was okay, that it would be over soon, that he was there and wasn't leaving. The words sounded empty even to him. How could he promise he wouldn't leave when he had spent the last few months leaving all the time, leaving her alone, choosing work over his daughter? The tests took an eternity. David stayed in the room with Helena, watching her sleep again, watching her small chest rise and fall with her breath. He took out his cell phone and thought about calling someone. But who? Laura was in Denver and probably wouldn't even answer. His parents had passed away years ago. He had no siblings, true friends, the kind that show up in tough times he hadn't cultivated. He only had work colleagues and business acquaintances, people who disappeared when you were no longer useful to them. He thought about calling Jessica to demand explanations, but the anger he felt was so great that he knew he would scream, would say things he shouldn't. So he just put the phone away and continued holding Helena's hand, feeling how that small, hot hand was the most precious thing in the world. How had it taken him so long to realize that? 2 hours later, the doctor returned with the results. He pulled up a chair and sat in front of David, and that simple gesture made his heart race. Doctors only sat down when they had bad news. Everyone knew that. "Your daughter has appendicitis," the doctor said, and David felt the floor disappear from under his feet. "Acute appendicitis. We need to operate immediately. The appendix is inflamed and could rupture at any moment. If that happens, the infection can spread throughout the abdominal cavity, and the consequences could be severe." David couldn't speak. He just looked at Helena sleeping on the gurney, so tiny, so fragile, and thought he was going to throw up. Surgery. His 5-year-old daughter was going to have surgery. Because of him. Because he didn't answer the calls. Because he left her alone in pain until the situation became critical. "It's a routine surgery," the doctor continued, as if reading David's thoughts. "We do several a day, but it's important that it's done now. We need your authorization to proceed." David nodded, unable to form words. The doctor put a pile of papers in front of him, consent forms, explanations of possible risks and complications. David signed everything without reading, his hands shaking so much his signature barely looked like his. Then the nurses came and started preparing Helena for the operating room. They moved her to a larger bed, adjusted the monitors, checked her pressure, her temperature. "You can stay with her until the door of the surgical center," a nurse said with a gentle smile that was probably trained, but still brought some comfort. "The surgery should take about an hour. Then she'll go to recovery and you can see her. David followed as they wheeled Helena down the hospital corridors. She woke up halfway and looked at him with those blue eyes full of fear. "Daddy, are you going to stay with me?" she asked in her weak little voice. "I'm going to stay the whole time," my love, David lied, because he couldn't go into the operating room, couldn't be there when they cut her little tummy, when they inserted tubes and needles and did things he didn't even want to imagine. "I'll be right here when you wake up, I promise." When they reached the double doors of the surgical center, a nurse stopped David. "This is it," she said softly. "We'll take care of her now. You can wait in the waiting room on the second floor. We'll call you as soon as it's over." David bent down and kissed Helena's forehead, feeling the tears he had held back until now finally escape. "I love you, my love," he whispered. "You are the most important thing in my life, more important than any meeting, any deal, anything. Forgive me for taking so long to understand that." Helena just looked at him, too little to understand all the words, but perhaps old enough to feel their weight. "I love you too, Daddy," she said, and then the doors closed and she was gone from sight. David stood there for a time he couldn't measure, staring at the closed doors, at the restricted access sign, at everything that separated him from his daughter. Then he turned and went to the waiting room as instructed. It was a drab space with uncomfortable blue plastic chairs, old magazines scattered on a coffee table, a television in the corner showing some talk show with the sound off. There were other people there, other parents and mothers and family members waiting for news of their loved ones, all with the same anxious expression, all trapped in that terrible limbo between fear and hope. David sat in a chair near the window and looked out. He could see part of the city, the lit buildings, the cars down below looking like ants. Life continuing normally for all those who didn't have a 5-year-old daughter being operated on at that exact moment. He took out his cell phone and saw several work messages. The investors wanting to confirm contract details, employees with questions about projects, clients chasing deadlines. Everything that just hours ago seemed urgent and important was now nothing but insignificant noise. He replied to only one message, to his assistant, saying he had a family emergency and wouldn't be in the office for the next few days. She replied immediately asking if everything was okay, if he needed anything. David didn't reply. He turned off the phone and put it in his pocket. The world could wait. Helena couldn't. The minutes dragged on like hours. David looked at the clock on the wall every 2 seconds, watching the hands move with painful slowness. 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. Every minute was torture, every second an eternity. He tried to pray, even though he wasn't religious, even though he hadn't set foot in a church since his wedding to Laura. He tried to make promises to God, to the universe, to any higher power that might be listening. "If you let Helena be okay, I'll change. I'll be a better father. I'll be present. I'll choose her instead of work. I'll do things differently." An hour passed. Then an hour and 15 minutes. David was starting to get desperate, imagining that something had gone wrong, that the surgery had been complicated, that he was about to receive the worst news a father can receive. But then the waiting room door opened and the doctor appeared, still in his green surgical scrubs, the mask hanging around his neck, and he was smiling. That smile was the most beautiful thing David had ever seen in his life. Everything went well, the doctor said, and David felt his legs buckle with relief. The surgery was a success. We removed the appendix before it ruptured. She's in recovery now, still drowsy from the anesthesia, but she should wake up in the next few hours. She'll need to stay in the hospital for a few days, but recovery is quick in children. She's going to be fine. David couldn't hold back the tears. They streamed down his face uncontrollably, tears of relief, of gratitude, of guilt, of everything mixed together. "Thank you," was all he could manage to say. "Thank you so much." The doctor put a hand on his shoulder. "Your job now is to be present for her during recovery. Children heal faster when they have their parents nearby, when they feel safe and loved." And David understood the message. The doctor knew. He knew he hadn't been present. He knew he had failed as a father. And this was his second chance. The chance to do things differently. To be the father Helena deserved. "Can I see her?" David asked, and the doctor nodded, signaling for him to follow. They walked down the corridors to the recovery room, and there was Helena lying in a bed connected to monitors and an IV, but breathing, alive, safe. David approached slowly and took her hand. She was still sleeping, her little face pale but peaceful. And there in that hospital room, holding the hand of the daughter he had almost lost through negligence, David Oliveira made a promise that would change the rest of their lives, a promise he would keep no matter what it cost. Helena woke up a few hours later, confused and scared, not understanding where she was or what had happened. "Daddy," she called in a weak voice, and David was there immediately, holding her hand, stroking her hair, telling her it was okay, that it was over, that she was very brave. "It hurts, Daddy," she complained, touching her belly where there was a large bandage. "It hurts a lot." The nurse came and administered more pain medication through the IV. In a few minutes, Helena relaxed again, her eyes growing heavy. David pulled up a chair and sat next to the bed, still holding his daughter's hand. He wasn't going to leave. He wouldn't let her wake up alone for even a second. These days in the hospital would be dedicated exclusively to her. Work could wait. The world could wait. Helena couldn't. The night was long. Helena woke up from time to time in pain or asking for water, or simply scared. Every time David was there calming her, caring for her, being the father he should have been all along. Between naps, he reflected on everything that had gone wrong. How he had let work consume every piece of his life. How he had neglected the only person who truly mattered. How he had become exactly the kind of man he swore he would never be. His own father had been like that. A success-obsessed businessman who spent his entire life working, accumulating money, building an empire, but never had time for his son. David grew up in a huge empty house, surrounded by servants but alone in a way that mattered. His father would come home late at night, too tired to talk, too stressed to play. On weekends, he was always at the office or on business trips. And David swore when he was a child, that when he had children, he would be different. He would be present. He would be the father he never had. But look at what he had become. An exact copy of the man he promised never to imitate. Working until he couldn't stand it. Leaving his daughter alone. Outsourcing paternal love to paid employees. Choosing money over presence. And it took almost losing Helena to finally wake up. To finally understand that he was making the same mistakes he had criticized his own father for. When the sun began to rise and faint light entered the hospital room window, David was still awake, watching Helena sleep. He had spent the entire night there without closing his eyes for a minute, afraid that if he slept, something bad might happen. Nurses came in every hour to check her vital signs, change the IV, administer medication. They all commented on how rare it was to see such a dedicated father. Most men left after a few hours, let the mothers take over, showed up only for quick visits. But David wasn't going anywhere. On the second day, Helena was more awake and started to complain of boredom. David called his assistant and asked her to buy children's books, games, toys, anything that could entertain a 5-year-old girl stuck in a hospital bed. The assistant showed up a few hours later with 2 bags full of things. David thanked her and quickly dismissed her. He didn't want visitors from work. He didn't want that world to invade this space that was just for him and Helena. They spent the entire day together. David read stories, made funny voices for the characters, made Helena laugh even though she was in pain. They played simple games, put together puzzles, drew together. They really talked for the first time in months. Helena told him about school, about her friends, about the teacher she loved, about the boy who pulled her hair at recess. David listened to every word, as if it were the most important thing in the world. Because it was, because everything involving Helena was important. How had it taken him so long to understand that? On the 3rd day, Jessica called. David answered, the anger still simmering inside him. "Where were you?" he asked bluntly, keeping his voice low so as not to scare Helena, who was sleeping. "You left my 5-year-old daughter alone. She was in pain, called me 14 times, and you just left." On the other end of the line, Jessica started to cry. "Mr. David, please forgive me. My mom was in an accident. She broke her leg. The hospital called saying it was urgent. I panicked. I didn't think straight. I thought you would be home soon. I thought Helena would be fine for a few minutes. I didn't know she was that sick. If I had known, I never would have left. You have to believe me." David wanted to stay angry. He wanted to yell, to blame someone other than himself. But hearing Jessica cry, Hearing the genuine desperation in her voice, he realized she was human too. She had also made a mistake. A terrible mistake, but a mistake nonetheless. And in the end, the greater fault was his. If he had answered Helena's calls, if he had gone home when his daughter needed him, none of this would have happened the way it did. "I understand," he said finally, the anger deflating like air from a punctured balloon. "But you can't work for me anymore, Jessica. Not after this. I'll pay you for the days you worked, but our professional relationship ends here." Jessica kept apologizing, kept crying, but David hung up the phone. He didn't have the energy for that conversation. He didn't have space in his head for anything but Helena. He would have to find someone else to take care of her during the hours he needed to work. But this time it would be different. This time he would be more present. He would reduce his workload. He would delegate more to his managers. He would do whatever it took to ensure Helena was never alone again when she needed him. On the 4th day, the doctor said Helena could be discharged the next day if she continued to recover well. David would need to care for the bandage, administer the medication at the right times, and bring her back for a checkup in a week. He wrote everything down meticulously, asked questions about every detail, wanted to be absolutely sure he knew exactly what to do. He wouldn't make any mistakes this time. That night, after Helena fell asleep, David left the room for the first time in 4 days. He went to the hospital chapel, a small, quiet space with a few rows of benches and a simple cross on the wall. He sat in the front row and finally allowed all the emotions he had been holding back to surface. He cried like he hadn't cried since he was a child. He cried for the daughter he almost lost. He cried for the absent father he had been. He cried for the wrong choices, the lost time, the wasted opportunities to be present, to create memories, to be the father Helena deserved. And in the midst of that crying, of all that pain, he made a promise. A real promise. Not just empty words spoken in desperation. He promised he would change. He promised he would do things differently. He promised that Helena would always be his priority. No matter what it cost. No matter how many deals he lost. No matter how much money he failed to make. Nothing was worth more than his daughter. Nothing ever would be. When he returned to the room, Helena was awake. "Where did you go, Daddy?" she asked, her eyes wide with worry. "I thought you had left." "Never, my love," David said, sitting on the edge of the bed and hugging her carefully so as not to hurt her. "I will never leave. I will always be here when you need me. Always. That's a promise." Helena hugged him back, squeezing with that surprising strength little kids have. And in that embrace, David felt that something had changed. Something fundamental had transformed within him. He was no longer the man he was 4 days ago. He was no longer the obsessed entrepreneur who put work above all else. He was a father. Simply a father who loved his daughter more than anything in this world. The next day, Helena was discharged. David dressed her carefully, put her in a wheelchair as the hospital required, and took her to the car. The entire way home he drove slowly, avoiding potholes, taking care on every turn. Helena was excited to go home, to sleep in her own bed, to play with her own toys. But she was different too. More clingy to her father, more needy. As if the trauma of those days had created a new bond between them. A stronger, deeper bond. When they got home, David carried Helena to her room. The house was clean. The housekeeper had been and left everything tidy. But it felt different now. It felt less like a showroom and more like a home. David settled Helena in bed, arranged the pillows just the way she liked, and covered her with her favorite blanket. He brought her water, medicine, the favorite doll that had been forgotten in the kitchen on that terrible day. "Are you going to stay here with me?" Helena asked, and there was fear in her voice. Fear that he would leave, that he would go back to work, that everything would go back to the way it was before. "I'm staying," David promised, lying down next to her on top of the covers. "I'm not going anywhere. We'll watch cartoons together. We'll read stories. We'll do whatever you want. Just you and me." And that's exactly what they did. They spent the rest of the day together, with no rush, no commitments, no cell phone ringing, no work invading. Just a father and a daughter, reconnecting, rebuilding, starting over. And for the first time in a long time, David felt he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Not in a meeting room, not closing deals, not chasing millions. But there in his daughter's bed, watching cartoons, listening to her laugh, feeling her small hand hold his. This was true success. This was the only prize worth winning. The following weeks were different from anything David had experienced in recent years. He cancelled meetings, delegated projects, and started working from home whenever possible. The company didn't collapse as he secretly feared. The managers took on more responsibilities and proved to be more competent than he imagined. Business continued to function, clients remained satisfied, and money kept coming in. It turned out the world didn't need David Oliveira as much as he thought it did. The company survived perfectly well with him being just a manager instead of an obsessed workaholic. Helena recovered quickly, as the doctor had predicted. In 2 weeks, she was running around the house again, playing, laughing, being a kid. But something had changed in her too. She was more attached to her father now, needed to know where he was at all times, got nervous if he spent too long in his office. David understood. She had learned the hard way that she couldn't count on him always being there. So now he had to prove otherwise. He had to show her every day that he had truly changed, that he was reliable, that she could depend on him. He hired a new nanny, a 50-year-old woman named Marta, who had raised 3 children and had impeccable recommendations. But unlike before, David didn't just drop Helena off with her and disappear. He stayed present. He worked in his home office while Marta looked after Helena, but he always stopped when his daughter needed him, whenever she wanted to show him a drawing or tell a story or just give him a hug. The office doors stayed open. There was no longer that invisible barrier between work and family. Gradually, Helena began to trust again. She started to relax, to accept that her father really had changed. The nights that were once lonely, with David arriving after she was already asleep, were now filled with stories, conversations, and laughter. He had dinner with her every day. He put her to bed every night. He was there when she woke up in the morning. He took her to school and picked her up. He went to parent-teacher meetings. He knew her little friends, her teachers, her classmates' parents. One day, 2 months after the surgery, Helena was playing in the living room when she suddenly stopped and looked at David with those blue eyes that were too serious for a 5-year-old. "Daddy, can I ask you a question?" she said, and there was something in her voice that made David put down his laptop immediately and give her his full attention. "Of course, my love. You can ask anything. Are you still going to leave like before?" Helena asked, and her voice trembled a little. "Are you going to go back to being away again?" David felt his heart tighten. He got up from the sofa, went over to where she was sitting on the floor surrounded by dolls, and sat down next to her. He took her small hands and looked into her eyes with all the sincerity he had. "Never," he said. "I promise you, Helena, I will never be like I was before. I learned that you are the most important thing in my life. More important than work, than money, than anything else. You are my priority. You always will be." "But you promised before," Helena said, and now the tears began to fall. "You promised you'd be home for dinner. You promised you'd take me to the park. You promised you'd watch my school play. And you were never there. There was always work. There was always something more important." David felt each word like a punch. She was right. He had made promises before and broken every single one. Why should she believe him now? How could he prove that this time was different? Words weren't enough anymore. He needed actions. He needed concrete proof. "You're right," he said softly. "I made promises before and I didn't keep them. I was a bad father. I left you alone when you needed me most. And I'm sorry, Helena. I'm so sorry. But this time is different, and I'm going to prove it to you every single day. I'm not just going to promise. I'm going to show you. I will be here. Every night for dinner. Every weekend for outings. At every play, every party, everything that's important to you. I will be there. Always." Helena looked at him for a long moment, trying to decide if she believed him, if she could trust again. Then she threw herself into his arms and started to cry. A different cry from the one in the kitchen 2 months ago. A cry of relief, of hope, of a child who finally had permission to believe that things could be different. David hugged her tightly, feeling his own tears fall. He would prove it to her, no matter how long it took. He would win back the trust he had lost. He would be the father she deserved. That night, after Helena fell asleep, David went to his office and looked at the computer full of unread emails, at the calendar packed with commitments. And he made a decision that would change everything. He picked up the phone and called Ricardo, his partner, the man who had helped build the company from the beginning. Ricardo answered on the second ring. "David, everything okay? It's kind of late to call. Did something happen?" "Yes," David said. "I want to make you an offer. I want to sell you my share of the company." Silence on the other end of the line. Then Ricardo asked, incredulous, "Are you serious? Why, the company is doing great. That acquisition you wanted so badly is practically closed. You're going to be one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country. Why on earth would you want to leave now?" "Because I realized I was chasing the wrong things," David explained. "I spent years building this empire, sacrificed everything, even my daughter, for money and recognition. And I almost lost her, Ricardo. I almost lost Helena because I was too busy being successful. And when I was in that hospital, when I thought I was going to lose her, I realized that none of it mattered. Nothing. So yes, I'm serious. I want to sell. I want to get out while I still have time to be the father she needs." Ricardo took a deep breath. "Are you sure about this?" "This isn't a decision to make in the heat of the moment." "I'm absolutely sure," David replied. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Get the papers ready. Let's talk numbers. But I want out." They talked for another hour, discussing details, values, timelines. In the end, Ricardo agreed. He had always wanted full control of the company. David was giving him that opportunity on a silver platter. In the coming weeks, they would formalize everything. David would walk away with a considerable sum, more than enough money to live comfortably for the rest of his life without having to work another hour. But more important than the money was the freedom. The freedom to finally live, to be present, to be the father Helena deserved. When David hung up the phone, he felt a huge weight lift from his shoulders. For years he had carried that company on his back, that constant responsibility, that infinite pressure, and now he was getting rid of it all. He was choosing his daughter over the empire, and for the first time in a long time, he felt he was making the right choice. In the following weeks, while the lawyers handled the paperwork, David began to plan the future. A different future focused on Helena. He researched schools with reduced hours so he could spend more time with her. He made lists of activities they could do together. He thought about traveling, seeing new places, creating memories that would last forever. One afternoon, he was in the kitchen preparing a snack when Helena appeared with a sheet of paper full of drawings. "Look what I made in school, Daddy," she said proudly, showing a drawing of the family. There were 2 stick figures, one big and one small, holding hands under a yellow sun. Underneath, it was written in adorable crooked letters, "Me and my daddy." David took the drawing and felt his eyes fill with tears for the 1,000th time in recent weeks. It seemed he had become a man who cried easily now. But he wasn't ashamed of it. These tears were of gratitude, of love, of happiness for finally living right. "It's beautiful, my love," he said, hugging Helena. "I'm going to put it on the fridge. That way I can see it every day." "There's no mommy in the drawing," Helena said softly. "Just us two." David was silent for a moment. Laura hadn't called Helena in almost 2 months. She hadn't come to visit after the surgery, hadn't sent a gift, hadn't even asked how her daughter was. She was too busy with her new life in Denver, with her rich boyfriend, with parties and trips. Helena had stopped asking about her mother. She had accepted, in the way children accept painful things, that her mother had chosen another life, a life that didn't include her. "It really is just us two," David said gently, pulling Helena onto his lap. "And that's okay, because I love you enough for 2. I love you more than anything in this whole world." "I love you too, Daddy," Helena said, hugging his neck. "You're the best dad in the universe." And at that moment, with his daughter in his arms, with the drawing of the 2 stick figures in his hand, David knew he had made the right decision. He had given up the empire, the money, the recognition, but he had gained something infinitely more valuable. He had gotten his daughter back. He had gained a second chance to be the father he should have been from the beginning. And he wasn't going to waste this chance. No matter what happened, Helena was his priority now, his only true priority. 3 months after Helena's surgery, the sale of the company was finalized. David signed the last papers in a law office in downtown Chicago, shook Ricardo's hand one last time as partners, and walked out feeling lighter than he had felt in years. His corporate cell phone was permanently off. His work email had an auto-reply directing contacts to the new administration. He was no longer the workaholic CEO, he was just David, just a father dedicated to raising his daughter in the best way possible. With the money from the sale, he bought a smaller house in a quieter neighborhood. It was still in Lincoln Park, but far from the gated community full of obsessed executives who were never home. The new house had 3 bedrooms, a large backyard with trees and space for Helena to play. It had a porch where they could have breakfast together every morning. It had less luxury, but more life, more love, more memories waiting to be made. Helena loved the new house, especially the backyard. David bought a wooden playhouse, a swing set, an inflatable pool. On weekends, they would stay outside, playing, talking, just being father and daughter. David learned to make pancakes because Helena loved them. He learned to comb her hair, even if the buns always came out a bit crooked. He learned to play with dolls, to make up stories, to be patient when she threw a tantrum, to be firm when necessary, but always with love. Marta continued to work for them, but now with reduced duties. She helped with the cleaning and prepared some meals, but David made a point of being present as much as possible. He took Helena to school every morning and picked her up every afternoon. He knew all her teachers by name. He knew who his daughter's best friends were, what games she liked best, which subject she found most difficult. One Saturday afternoon, they were in the backyard when Helena asked if they could get a dog. David, who had never considered getting a pet before because he didn't have time to care for one, realized that now there was no reason to say no. He had all the time in the world. So the following Monday, they went to an animal shelter, and Helena chose a 3-month-old tan-colored mutt that wouldn't stop wagging its tail. "What are we going to name him?" David asked as they drove home with the puppy in Helena's lap. "Toby," Helena said without hesitation, petting the little dog. "He looks like a Toby." So Toby became part of the family. One more responsibility, one more thing to care for, but David didn't mind. Seeing the happiness on Helena's face when she played with the dog was worth any extra work. He taught her how to care for the animal, to give it water and food, to clean up when it made a mess. Helena took it seriously, treated Toby as if he were a baby, talked to him, told him secrets, slept with him at the foot of her bed. The months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. A slower, more intentional rhythm. David woke up early not to rush to meetings, but to make breakfast with Helena. They ate together, talked about what would happen during the day, made plans for the weekend. Then he would take her to school, come home and do chores or read a book or simply do nothing. For the first time in over a decade, he had time to think, to breathe, to exist beyond work. It was strange at first. Years of frenetic rushing had trained his brain to always be busy, always producing, always moving from one thing to the next. Sitting still was difficult. Not having urgent emails to answer caused anxiety, but gradually he got used to it. He learned to be present in the moment. He discovered simple pleasures he had forgotten existed. Drinking coffee slowly while looking out the window. Reading an entire book in one day. Taking unhurried walks in the park. When he picked Helena up from school, they didn't rush home. They stopped at the playground, bought ice cream, sat on a bench and talked about her day. Helena told him every detail, every small event that was huge to her. And David listened to everything with genuine attention, asking questions, showing real interest, because these were the things that mattered. Not mergers and acquisitions, not spreadsheets and presentations, but knowing that her friend lent her the red-colored pencil, that the teacher praised her drawing, that she got a perfect score on her math test. One afternoon, 6 months after leaving the company, David was on the porch reading when his cell phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. He answered curiously. "Hello, David," a female voice said on the other end. "It's Laura." David was silent for a moment, processing. Laura, his ex-wife who hadn't called in 4 months, who hadn't visited Helena after the surgery, who had basically disappeared from her daughter's life without looking back. "Hi," he said finally, keeping his voice neutral. "What do you want?" "I wanted to know how Helena is," Laura said, and there was something in her voice. Regret maybe, or guilt. "I heard she had surgery, appendicitis." "That was 6 months ago," David said dryly. "Where were you for these past 6 months, Laura? Your daughter was almost lost because I wasn't present when she needed me. She went through surgery, spent days in the hospital, recovered at home, and you didn't call once. Not once, I know, Laura said, and now she was crying. I know, and I regret it. I was so caught up in my new life with Robert, with everything. I thought she was fine with you. I thought she didn't need me. She's your daughter, David said, feeling the old anger return. Of course she needs you, or at least she did. Now I don't even know anymore. You disappeared, Laura. You chose a man you barely knew over your own daughter. I know, Laura repeated. I know. And it was the worst decision of my life. I broke up with Robert. We fought because he made it clear he would never accept Helena. He said if I wanted to stay with him, I had to forget my old life. Forget you, forget her. And I, God forgive me, I considered it. I considered abandoning my own daughter for a man. David said nothing. Waited for her to continue. But then I woke up, Laura continued. I realized what I was doing. I realized I was throwing away the most precious thing I had. And now he's out of my life and I want to come back. I want to be in Helena's life again. I want to be the mother I should have been from the beginning. David was silent for a long moment, thinking. Part of him wanted to say no, wanted to protect Helena from the pain of having a mother who abandoned her, and now wanted to come back when it was convenient. But another part of him knew that Helena missed her mother. She asked about her sometimes, even while pretending it didn't matter. And every child deserved to have both parents when possible. Deserved to have a present mother, even if that mother had made terrible mistakes. You're going to have to earn her trust back, David said finally. It's not going to be easy, Laura. You hurt her. You disappeared when she needed you most. So if you're coming back, it has to be for real. It has to be for good. You can't show up now and disappear again when you get tired of it. I know, Laura said, and I promise. I'll do things differently this time. I'll be the mother she deserves, David sighed. Okay, you can come visit. But slowly. I'm not just going to throw you back into her life. We'll do this the right way, for her sake. They arranged for Laura to come the following weekend. A short visit, a few hours just to reconnect, to see how Helena would react, if she was ready to have her mother back in her life. David wasn't sure if he was doing the right thing, but he decided to trust his instinct. To trust that he was making the decision that was best for Helena. When he told his daughter that her mother was coming to visit, Helena's reaction was complicated. First excitement, her eyes shining with hope. Then fear, remembering the pain of being abandoned. Then anger, crossing her little arms and saying she didn't want to see her. And finally confusion, not knowing what to feel, what to think. It's normal to have mixed feelings, David said gently, hugging her. Your mom made a big mistake. She knows that, but she wants another chance. And I think you deserve to have a present mother if she's really changed. But if you don't want to see her yet, that's okay. I won't force you. Helena thought for a long moment. She can come, the girl said finally. But if she leaves again, I don't want to see her anymore. Deal, David agreed. If she disappears again, it's over. But let's give her a chance for her to prove she's changed. The Saturday of the visit arrived and David was nervous. Not for himself, but for Helena. She had woken up excited, but as the time for the visit approached, she became quieter, more withdrawn. She clung to her father the whole time, as if afraid he would leave too. David reassured her repeatedly, saying he wasn't going anywhere, that he would be right there the whole time, that it was just a visit. Laura arrived promptly at 2 in the afternoon. David opened the door and for a moment they just looked at each other. She was different. Thinner, with deep dark circles under her eyes, her hair less coiffed than it used to be. She looked tired. She looked like someone who had been through difficulties. David felt neither pity nor satisfaction. Just a careful neutrality. Hi, she said softly. Thank you for letting me come. Helena is in the living room, David said, making space for her to enter. Remember, slow. Don't force anything. Laura nodded and went in. Helena was sitting on the sofa with Toby in her lap. Small and vulnerable, her blue eyes fixed on the mother she hadn't seen in months. For a moment, no one moved. Then Laura knelt on the floor at her daughter's level, and tears began to stream down her face. Hi, my love, she said, her voice choked. You're so big, so beautiful. Helena didn't answer. She just looked at her mother with an expression too serious for a 5-year-old. An expression that said, you hurt me. You left. I know you're mad at me, Laura continued, wiping away tears, but more kept falling. And you have every right to be. I was a terrible mother. I abandoned you when you needed me most. I made the wrong choices. But I love you, Helena. I've always loved you, even when I did everything wrong. And if you let me, I want the chance to prove it. To be the mother you deserve. Why did you leave? Helena asked finally, and her voice came out small and fragile. Did I do something wrong? No, Laura said quickly, moving closer but not touching yet, respecting her daughter's space. No, my love, you did nothing wrong ever. I'm the one who did everything wrong. I was confused, I was unhappy. I thought I would find happiness somewhere else. But I was wrong. Happiness was right here with you, and it took me too long to realize that. Helena looked at her father, as if seeking approval, seeking to know if she should believe. David nodded slightly, encouragingly. Helena then looked back at her mother and slowly, very slowly, held out her hand. Laura took it immediately, squeezing that small hand as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Are you going to stay now? Helena asked. Or are you going to leave again? I'm staying, Laura promised. I'm not leaving. I'll be here whenever you need me. I promise. The visit lasted 3 hours. At first, Helena was reserved, but gradually she relaxed. Laura played with her, met Toby, listened to stories about school and friends. David was present the whole time, watching, making sure everything was okay. And to his surprise, it was. Laura seemed genuinely sorry. She seemed to really want to be a mother again. When Laura left, she said goodbye to Helena with a long hug. Can I come back next week? She asked David at the door. I promise I won't disappoint you again. You can, David agreed, but slowly. Helena needs time to trust again. I understand, Laura said. And David, thank you for taking such good care of her, for being the father that I failed to be as a mother. You've changed. You've changed a lot. David just nodded. She was right. He had changed. And he would stay changed, because he had learned the hard way what truly mattered in life. The following weeks brought a new routine. Laura visited every weekend, staying a few hours with Helena. Gradually, the girl opened up, forgave, and accepted that her mother had come back to stay. It wasn't like before, it never would be, but it was a start. It was a chance to rebuild. A month after the visits began, Laura asked if she could take Helena to spend a day with her. Go to the mall, have lunch together, do mother-daughter things. David hesitated. The overprotectiveness was still strong in him. The fear of letting Helena out of his sight still haunted him, but he knew he had to trust. He had to let Helena have a relationship with her mother without him always in the middle. Okay, he finally agreed, but you bring her back by 6. And anything at all, you call me immediately, Laura promised. And the following Saturday, she showed up to pick up Helena. The girl was excited, wearing a new dress David had bought especially for the occasion. She hugged her father tightly before leaving. I love you, Daddy, she said. I'll be back soon. David stood on the porch watching Laura's car disappear down the street. The silence of the empty house was deafening. He tried to read, watch television, do anything to pass the time. But he couldn't concentrate. He kept looking at the clock every 5 minutes, counting the hours until Helena returned. At 6 o'clock sharp, Laura's car pulled up in front of the house. Helena ran out carrying shopping bags, her face lit up with happiness. Daddy, Daddy, look at everything Mommy bought, she shouted, showing new clothes, toys, books. David hugged her, feeling relief wash over him. Laura approached, smiling. It was a great day, she said. Thank you for trusting me. And David realized that maybe, just maybe, things could work out. Helena could have both parents present. She could grow up knowing she was loved, that she was a priority, that she wasn't alone. It wouldn't be a traditional family, but it would be a family. And that's what mattered. The months continued to pass and Helena turned 6. David organized a party in the backyard of the new house. He invited her school friends, decorated everything with colorful balloons, and ordered a huge chocolate cake that she loved. Laura came to help with the organization, and for the first time since the divorce, they worked together on something. Not as husband and wife, but as parents, united by the love they felt for their daughter. The party was a success. Helena was radiant, playing with her friends, blowing out the candles, opening presents. David and Laura stood in the background watching, and there was a moment when their eyes met. A silent understanding passed between them. They had both made mistakes. They had both learned. They were both trying to do better now, and maybe that was enough. When all the guests had left and Helena was asleep, exhausted but happy, David sat on the porch as he did every night. Toby came to lie at his feet. The house was silent, peaceful. And for the first time since he could remember, David felt complete. Not because he had money or success or recognition, but because he had Helena. Because he was present. Because he had chosen what truly mattered. He thought about the man he was a year ago. The obsessed entrepreneur who didn't answer his daughter's calls because he was too busy. The absent father who outsourced love. The man who almost lost everything by chasing empty things. That man no longer existed. He had been transformed by fear, by guilt, by the near loss. He had been rebuilt piece by piece into a present, loving, dedicated father. The journey hadn't been easy. It had required enormous sacrifices. It had required giving up ambitions he had pursued for years. It had required deep, painful, necessary change. But every sacrifice had been worth it. Every difficult choice had led to moments like this. Moments of peace, of love, of true presence. David closed his eyes and listened to the sounds of the night. The wind in the trees, the crickets chirping, Toby snoring softly. And inside the house, Helena slept safely, knowing her father was there, knowing she wasn't alone, knowing she was completely loved. And that certainty, that security he had given her was the greatest success he could have ever achieved. Greater than any merger, any acquisition, any bank account. He had learned that true success isn't measured in money or power. It's measured in tight hugs before bed, in shared laughter during dinner, in the feeling of knowing someone depends on you and trusts you completely, in being the kind of father his daughter would remember with love when she grew up, in creating memories that would last forever, not in a company's files but in a child's heart. And as he sat there on that quiet night, David made one last silent promise. He promised he would keep choosing right. He would keep prioritizing Helena above all else. He would continue to be the father she deserved, because he had learned the most important lesson of all, that some things once lost never come back. That time cannot be recovered. That childhood passes too quickly, and that every moment, every hug, every bedtime story was precious and irreversible. The years passed, and Helena grew. At 8, she was a smart, talkative girl, full of life. She loved to read, draw, and play with Toby, who was now an adult dog but remained her best friend. Her relationship with Laura had strengthened. Her mother visited every week, took Helena on outings, was present at school performances, birthdays, and important events. She didn't live with them. She had her own apartment in Chicago, but she was present in a way she hadn't been before. Better late than never, David sometimes thought. David had found a balance in life. He didn't go back to working full-time, hadn't returned to the corporate world, but he did occasional consulting, helped small businesses with growth strategies, gave some lectures on management and leadership. He earned enough money without sacrificing time with Helena. The best of both worlds, he discovered. Professional purpose without losing what truly mattered. One Thursday afternoon, David was in his home office working on a presentation when Helena came home from school quieter than usual. He noticed immediately. Years of being present had taught him to perceive the nuances in her behavior, the small changes that indicated something was wrong. "Hi, my love," he said, putting his work aside immediately. "How was school today?" "It was good," Helena replied, but without the usual enthusiasm. Her voice was low, her shoulders slumped. David got up and went to her. "What happened?" he asked gently. "You can tell me." Helena hesitated, looking at her own feet. Then she spoke in a voice so low David almost didn't hear. "The teacher asked us to draw our family, and I drew you, me, Toby, and Mummy. But Julia, she asked why my mum doesn't live with us. She said that real families all live together, that mine is a broken family." David felt anger rise, but he controlled it. Children could be cruel without understanding the weight of their words. He knelt in front of Helena and held her shoulders gently. "Look at me, my love," he said. Helena lifted her eyes and there were tears there. "Listen to what I'm going to tell you, because it's very important. Family has nothing to do with who lives in the same house. Family is about love. It's about being present. It's about people who care about each other, who take care of each other, who are there when you need them." "But all my friends live with their mom and dad," Helena said, her voice trembling. "Why can't I?" Because sometimes things don't work out the way we want, David explained patiently. Your mom and I didn't get along. We fought a lot, and it wasn't healthy for either of us, especially for you. But that doesn't mean our family is broken. It means it's different. And different isn't bad, my love. Hey, it's just different. Julia said I don't have a real family, Helena repeated, and now the tears were streaming. She said I'm a child of divorced parents and that it's sad. David hugged his daughter tightly. You know what's sad, he said softly. Sad is having parents who live together but hate each other. Sad is having parents who are always fighting in front of their kids. Sad is having parents who don't love you, who aren't present, who don't care. But you have two parents who love you more than anything, who choose you every single day, who are here for you whenever you need them. That's not sad, my love. That's blessed. Helena cried for a few more minutes, but gradually calmed down. David led her to the sofa and they sat there just hugging. Toby came to lie at their feet, as if sensing someone needed comfort. After a while, Helena spoke again. Daddy, can I ask you something? Of course, anything. Do you still love Mommy? David thought carefully about the answer. Not like before, he said honestly. Not like a husband and wife love each other. But yes, I love her in the way you love someone who is important to you. Someone who is the mother of the most precious person in your life. Your mom and I don't work well together, but we respect each other, and we work together for your well-being. Because you are the priority for both of us. Are you never getting back together? Helena asked, and there was hope in her voice. That hope that many children of divorced parents carry. No, my love, David said gently. We're not. But that's not a bad thing. Because now we're all happier, and you have double the love. You have my house and your mom's house. You have two places where you are completely loved. Helena was silent for a moment, processing. Then she said, I think Julia is wrong. My family isn't broken. It's just different. David smiled, feeling his chest swell with pride. Exactly, my love. Exactly that. That night, after Helena fell asleep, David thought about their conversation, about how a classmate's words had hurt his daughter, about how the world judged families that didn't follow the traditional pattern. But he knew the truth. He knew that what mattered wasn't the structure, but the love. And Helena had more than enough love. She had a present father who put her first. She had a mother who had learned from her mistakes and come back. She had a home full of affection, security, and true presence. A few weeks later, the school organized a special day where parents could come and work with their children for a few hours. David didn't think twice before accepting. He arrived at the school at 9 in the morning and found Helena waiting anxiously at the classroom entrance. She introduced him to all her friends, including Julia, who was visibly impressed when David talked about the consulting work he did, about the companies he helped grow. During the activities, David noticed something interesting. Many of the parents who were there, those with traditional families, were more concerned with answering emails on their phones than interacting with their children. They were physically present, but emotionally absent. He recognized this because he had been exactly like that. A father who was there but not really present. Helena, on the other hand, had his full attention. They drew pictures together, participated in activities, talked and laughed. And at the end of the day, when the teacher thanked all the parents for participating, Helena held David's hand with visible pride. This is my dad, she said to Julia, and he's the best dad in the world. On the way home, Helena was radiant. Thanks for coming, Daddy, she said. Some dads couldn't come. They said they were too busy at work. I will never be too busy for you, David promised. Never again. I learned that lesson. When they got home, there was a surprise waiting. Laura was at the door holding a small suitcase. David was confused for a moment. It wasn't her visitation day. Sorry to show up unannounced, Laura said, but I need to talk to both of you. It's important. They went inside and sat in the living room. Helena sat between David and Laura on the sofa, looking curiously at her mother. Laura took a deep breath before speaking. I received a job offer, she began. A very good offer. But it's in Chicago, right here in the city. And I was thinking that maybe it was time to come back for good, to be closer to you, to Helena. Helena jumped with excitement. You're going to live nearby, Mommy, she shouted. For real? Laura smiled, wiping away a tear. Yes, my love, I'm going to rent an apartment. Not too far from here, so I can see you more often. To be even more present. David felt conflicting emotions. On one hand, he was happy for Helena. She would have her mother closer, more available. On the other hand, there was apprehension. What if Laura disappointed her again? What if she left again? Helena had grown, she had matured, but she was still a child. She could still be hurt. Laura must have noticed his hesitation because she looked directly into David's eyes. "I know what you're thinking," she said, "and you have a right to be afraid. I disappointed you before, but that was years ago. I've changed, David, for real, and I'm not going to disappear again. That's a promise I make not only to Helena, but to you too." David nodded slowly. "Okay," he said, "let's make this work for Helena." And so began a new phase. Laura moved to Chicago a month later. She rented an apartment 15 minutes away from David's house. Helena started spending some weekends with her mother, alternating between the two homes. At first, David was anxious every time she left, but gradually he relaxed. Laura had truly changed. She was keeping her promises. She was being the mother Helena deserved. They developed a co-parenting routine that worked surprisingly well. They talked about school, about important decisions, about Helena's well-being. They weren't exactly friends, but they were partners in the most important task of their lives: raising a happy, healthy, loved girl. 2 years passed since Laura returned to Chicago. Helena was 10 now, a smart and confident preteen who divided her time between her father's house and her mother's apartment naturally. The girl had blossomed, had become a happy, secure child, knowing she was loved by both parents. The wounds of the past had scarred over, not completely forgotten, because some things leave marks, but healed enough not to hurt anymore. One Saturday morning, David was in the kitchen making pancakes when Helena appeared, still in her pajamas with Toby following behind her. The dog was 10 years old now too, calmer but still a faithful companion. "Good morning, Daddy," she said, yawning and sitting at the table. "Good morning, my love," David replied, placing a plate of pancakes in front of her. "Sleep well?" "I did. I had a weird dream." "Oh yeah? Tell me." Helena picked up her fork and started eating as she talked. "I dreamed about that day." "You know which one?" "The day I got sick and you took a long time to get home." David stopped what he was doing and looked at her. They hadn't talked about that in years. The day of the appendicitis had become a distant memory, something that happened in almost another life. "You remember that day?" he asked gently. "I remember bits and pieces," Helena said thoughtfully. "I remember it hurt a lot. I remember I called you and you didn't answer. I remember I was really scared. But I also remember that when you arrived, you stayed with me, at the hospital, at home the whole time. And you never left again." David felt emotion tighten his throat. "You know, my love, that was the worst day of my life," he admitted. "But it was also the most important day. It was the day I woke up. It was the day I realized I was living all wrong, that I was losing the most important thing, which was you." "I know," Helena said simply, "and I forgave you a long time ago, Daddy. I was little, but I understood that you were always working. And then you changed. You stayed. That's what matters." David hugged his daughter, feeling pride mixed with gratitude. How she had grown. How she had become an incredible, empathetic person, capable of forgiveness. He had done many things wrong in his life, but raising Helena, being present for her, had been the one absolutely right thing. Later that day, David took Helena to the park where they used to go when she was younger. They walked the same paths, past the playground where she had played 1,000 times, sat on the same bench where they had talked about so many things over the years. The park was full of families, children running, fathers pushing swings, mothers chatting while their kids played. "Daddy," Helena said suddenly, "can I ask you a serious question?" "Of course, always. Do you regret it?" she asked. "Giving it all up? The company, the money, all that success. Do you regret choosing to stay with me instead of all that?" David looked at his daughter, at those blue eyes so much like her mother's, at the face he had watched grow, change, mature. "Not for a single second," he said with absolute certainty. "That company, that money, that so-called success, none of it ever made me truly happy. You know what makes me happy? You, being here with you, knowing that you're okay, that you're happy, that you know you're loved. That is success. That is what's worthwhile. Even with all the money you lost," Helena insisted. "People say you were almost a billionaire." That you were going to be one of the most important entrepreneurs in the country. And now I'm something much better, David said, smiling. I'm a present father. I'm someone who will be there when you need me, always. And honestly, my love, I'd rather be remembered as a good father than as a successful businessman. Because in the end, when we're old and look back, it's not the deals that matter. It's the people we love. It's the moments we create. It's the memories we build together. Helena leaned over and rested her head on her father's shoulder. I love you, Daddy. And you're the best dad I could have. I love you too, my love. More than anything in this entire universe. They stayed there for a while longer, just enjoying each other's presence, watching people pass by, children play, life happen around them. And David thought about the whole journey. How he had started as an obsessed entrepreneur who had no time for anything but work. How he had almost lost his daughter through negligence. How he had woken up at the last possible second. How he had changed, transformed, rebuilt his entire life around what truly mattered. It hadn't been easy. It had required enormous sacrifices. But every sacrifice had been worth it. Every difficult choice had led to moments like this. Moments of peace, of love, of true connection. And if he could go back in time, he would do it all over again. He would make the exact same choices. When they returned home late in the afternoon, Laura was waiting at the door. She had come to pick up Helena to spend Sunday with her. Hi, my love, she said, hugging her daughter. Ready for our special day tomorrow? Yes, Helena replied excitedly. It's going to be great. While Helena gathered her things, Laura approached David. Thank you, she said softly. For everything. For being the father I failed to be as a mother when it mattered most. For keeping Helena safe when I abandoned her. For giving me a second chance when I didn't deserve one. You did deserve it, David said. Everyone deserves a second chance. And you proved you really changed. Helena is happy. That's all that matters. She's happy because of you, Laura insisted. You saved her, David, in every possible way. We saved her, David corrected, together. You came back, became the mother she needed. I became the father I should have been from the start. We did this together. Helena returned with her backpack, Toby following sadly behind as he always did when she left. Don't be sad, Toby, she said, hugging the dog. I'll be back tomorrow night. David bent down and hugged his daughter. I love you, my love. Have fun with your mum. I love you too, Daddy. See you tomorrow. He stood at the door watching Laura's car disappear down the street. Toby sat beside him, also watching. David scratched the dog's head. It's just until tomorrow, buddy, he said. She always comes back. And he went into the house feeling that familiar pang of longing that came every time Helena left. But it wasn't like before, when the fear of loss was paralyzing. Now it was just the normal missing of a father who loves his daughter, because he knew with absolute certainty that she would always come back, that the bond between them was too strong to be broken, that he had built a solid foundation of love, presence, and trust that would last forever. That night, alone in the quiet house, David went out to the porch. It was a clear night with a starry sky. He sat in the rocking chair he had bought years ago and just looked at the stars. He thought about his father, who had spent his whole life working and never had time for his son. He thought about how he had started to follow the same path. He thought about how everything had changed on that terrible day when Helena called for help and he didn't answer. That day had been the awakening he needed. It had been the necessary shock to make him realize he was living wrong. And even though it was painful, even though it was traumatic, David was grateful for that day, because without it, he probably would have continued on the same path. He would have truly lost Helena. He would have become an exact copy of the absent father he so criticized. But he had changed. He had chosen differently. And now, 10 years later, he was reaping the rewards of that choice. He had a happy, healthy daughter who trusted him completely. He had a functional, co-parenting relationship with his ex-wife. He had a balanced life, with professional purpose but without sacrificing what truly mattered. He had peace. He had love. He had everything worth having. The phone rang, pulling David from his thoughts. It was Helena, video calling from Laura's apartment. Hi, Daddy, she said, smiling from the screen. Just wanted to say goodnight. David smiled, feeling his heart warm. Good night, my love. Enjoy your day with Mommy tomorrow. I will. Love you. Love you too. See you tomorrow. He hung up and put the phone away, looking at the stars again. and he made one last silent promise, as he did every night. He promised he would keep choosing right. He would keep being the father Helena deserved. He would keep prioritizing love above all else, because he had learned life's most important lesson. That true success isn't in bank accounts or professional titles. It's in tight hugs, shared laughter, true presence. It's in being loved and loving completely. It's in knowing that in the end, when life is over and material achievements turn to dust, what remains are the people we love and the memories we created with them. And David had created beautiful memories. He had built a relationship of genuine love with his daughter. He had become the man he always should have been. He wasn't perfect, he still made mistakes, but he was present. He was trying. He was choosing right every single day, and that in the end was all that mattered. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope David and Helena's story has deeply touched your hearts. If you identified with this journey of transformation, of an absent father who learned to be present, leave a comment telling us what marked you the most. Your opinion is very important to us and helps us continue creating stories that truly matter. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming stories. We have prepared emotional narratives that explore the complexity of life, love, family, and the choices we make. Every like you leave motivates us to continue. Every share helps other people find these stories that can transform perspectives and touch hearts. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, who is lost between work and family, who needs a reminder of what truly matters, share this story with them. Sometimes a story is all we need to wake up and make the right choices before it's too late. Every day we bring unique and special content like this. Don't miss out. We are waiting for you in the comments. Until the next story.